I'm Thomas Henschwitz with Chrono24. We have gathered a team of industry heavyweights here in New York from around the world to unveil something new and something special. But before we get to the big announcement, I want to introduce our panel here, and because it's a watch video, we'll do a little wrist check as well. I'll start to my left with Tim, CEO of Chrono24. Congrats on 20 years. What do you got on the wrist today?
Yeah, since we're in New York here, being in a different time zone than Germany, I picked my overseas dual time.
And on our left over here, we have Eric Nguyen. You may recognize him from our video on the Chrono24 YouTube channel. You may recognize his voice from the Significant Watches podcast, where he is co-host. He was VP of Watches at Christie's for a long, long time and has since founded Nguyen Vintage, curating the best in vintage watches, and has a lot of celebrity clients as well. Eric, what is on the wrist? You have a star of your own on the wrist today.
Yeah, watch I didn't know you love. It's a Rolex Explorer 2 reference 1655, sometimes nicknamed the Freccione in Italian because of the big orange hand. And this is a watch I fell in love with when it came to me a few months ago, so it's a keeper.
Yeah, I love that watch, in excellent condition as well.
Thank you, yeah, I love it.
We're gonna go over here to Mr. Jack Wong, coming all the way from Singapore.
Right.
Singapore is obviously a big financial hub, and you are a major banker over there as well, and have been interviewed by Revolution, Time and Tide, Quill Pad, among others, for your collecting. And you particularly are a big fan of independents as well.
Right.
With that in mind, you have two watches. Let's start with the independent over here.
Well, it's that because I thought that everyone would wear two watches today, right?
You're
so
over-prepared,
anyway,
yeah.
I'm wearing this too. There's two extreme and two different stuff. You have a more modern watch here, Armin Strom Resonance, and I'm wearing right now on my other right wrist, which I don't really wear watch on my right wrist. It's a Blancpain, right? 50 Fathoms. You guys are probably more familiar with this watch today, right? All thanks to collaboration that we have with Swatch. Yeah.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for coming from Singapore.
Thank you for having me.
And last but not least, we have Professor of Economics, Dr. Brendan Cunningham from Eastern Connecticut State University. You've seen his work in Hodinkee, Time and Tide, Quill Pad, and he is also the founder of Horolonomics, a publication covering the intersection between economics and watches. And you, sir, have a rather divisive Tudor on the wrist today. What's that about?
I'm wearing the Tudor North Flag, which is Tudor's first watch with an in-house caliber. Bought it for a special occasion and thought I'd break it out for this special occasion as well.
Now that we've got the pleasantries out of the way, Tim, why don't you tell us why we're all here?
We are Chrono24, a global marketplace for luxury watches, and we help buyers and sellers to buy and sell watches online. And what our mission is to make buying and selling for everybody as easy as it used to be just for the pros. So we want to give all the transparency, all the information. And one question that I got a lot, especially in the last 12 months, was, should I buy a watch right now or should I rather wait? And so we thought it's time for a real watch index to give an answer and a view on that question that I hear a lot. And this is why we're all here, the introduction of ChronoPulse, the world's watch index. What makes it special is, first, it relies on actual transaction data. So during the last 20 years, there have been more than 1 million transactions happened on Chrono24. So we have all that data, and we took all these data points, in total 4.6 million data points, into that watch collection. And we made this index out of 14 different brands. So making sure that it's not an index for 2 or 3 major brands, but that it's really covering the entire category. And I think this is really, really new, and it gave a little bit different results than what you've seen from other indexes. But there's one thing I really want to mention, that watches is first and foremost a passion. And I think it's fantastic to have a beautiful piece of mechanics on your wrist and enjoy it, and always get a smile when you look at it, and get a second smile when you look at the value appreciation. But I still think that you should not cold-heartedly buy a watch, put it in your safe and not even care about it. Then I think you're better off with the stock.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this industry is full of people who came from other industries as well and just had to work in watches, which is what I really love. So ChronoPulse gives a real-time look at actual sales data in the market And now that we're in a very particular year in the market, I want to ask the group, as we look ahead to 2024, are there brands you think are set up for success that are gonna, have some upside potential, whether it be the typical Rolex, Patek, or AP, or is this gonna be the Cartier year? Are we getting a JLC revival maybe? Eric, let's start with you. Where are we going from here?
Well, using some of Chrono24's data, I think we're kind of seeing an era of quieter luxury. So things like Tim's Vacheron, maybe some of the brands that aren't so well known are certainly coming up. JLC, I think, epitomizes that as well. So there's always movement in the watch market. Rolex is still the top of the mountain, or the mountain itself.
Always.
And everything kind of is driven from that, but certainly we're seeing a lot of other quieter brands, particularly Vacheron and JLC, get a lot more interest.
If I could follow up on something Eric mentioned, I think two of the high points for the past year or so have been Swatch's releases of accessible models that were sort of riffs on Omega's offerings as well as Blancpain's offerings. I think we're all kind of waiting to see if Breguet is next, and I think Breguet has been waiting for their moment, and so if we see a Breguet Swatch collaboration in the upcoming year, I think that's going to get a lot of attention for both brands.
Getting into kind of the nitty-gritty of this market index, Brendan, I want to start with you. As someone with a rich economic background, for the layman like me, can you tell us a little bit about the kind of principles at play here, the kind of levers behind the curtain?
Sure, absolutely. So the ChronoPulse index does build on a long tradition of trying to measure what's happening across multiple different types of products. And the Chrono24 team has done an excellent job in sort of leveraging that tradition. This is a Laspierre index, which is actually named after a German economist. And essentially, it involves taking a collection of things that people do actually buy, in this case watches, 140 of them in this case, so that it's a very, very diverse basket of watches. And Chrono24 is then able to see the prices paid for these watches and then share that information with the public. It's something that's sort of often imitated, but not exactly duplicated when you look at other sources that are not getting the data directly from transactions. And so my hat's off to the Chrono24 team for making this information available to the community.
And adding to what you said, Brandon, for us it was super, super important to have really one broad index covering the entire category, and we picked here the top 14 brands. But I think it's also important to notice that when you look at the individual indexes per brand, they sometimes tell very, very different stories. And so I think it's also important to have these indexes and have enough models per brand to get into that index. And for us, I think it was ultimately also important to work on actual transaction data. And I mean, we have seen a few other indexes in the market, and I think they did a good job in promoting these indexes, but most of them don't really have access to actual transaction data. And especially in these times of very volatile prices, there are a lot of watches that are offered at a certain price, but don't meet that price in the actual transaction. Could even be higher or lower. And given that we have so far, we did more than 1 million actual transactions over the last 10 years through Chrono24. So we have that data and are now using that data to publish that index. And it shows different results than what you've seen on other indexes that are more based on just asking prices.
You get a lot of offers for listing price versus actual sales price as well.
Yes, and this is really a special index because of that. It's a global index, so it's, you count for transactions around the world, often where sales are actually closed are significantly less than the ask. So it's important for people to realize.
Yeah, and it brings some transparency because there's, just because a watch is offered for a certain amount doesn't necessarily mean it's going to sell for that certain amount. Anyone who's sorted Chrono24 from high to low will see a couple outliers every now and then. Especially with moon swatches coming out and things like that. People are, being a little more confident, let's say, with some prices.
Yep.
Jack, I want to turn to you now. You are obviously a major player in the financial sphere. You have bought and sold a lot of watches, and we talked last night, you bought a lot at the right time as well. things that have appreciated in value
Right.
over time. I want to get your opinion on, perhaps you as a professional who's interested in these watches with a financial background, or even someone who's just more of a hobbyist, curious, is my date just going to go up, or when should I sell my Submariner?
Okay, so basically before in fact this ChronoPulse is introduced, I use Chrono24 often as well, right? First of all, it's difficult to find recent transacted prices. I'll be honest, right? Back then it's much easier. In the past, where people really use the forums to have a good indication price, but guess what? I think there's consumer shift, right, in the behaviors as well. People don't frequent forums. People like things that's fast and easy. So in fact, look at today, everyone is using their Instagram account. People don't really participate in forums. So when you want to find prices for all the things that you want to find, so that you know that you won't be buying at the high, so Chrono24 was one of the best places to find because they have more data there. So more watches are offered there as well. So with this ChronoPulse, I believe, and I think that you'll be able to see exactly how the market is headed to. So it's not exactly like we all know as economists, right? We know that past performance is not indicative of future performance, because I think just like that price is not just demand and just not as demand and supply. In fact, you have to throw in one more thing, right? Trend. And trend is something that we don't know, right? But then again, it is at least a very conscious effort to make sense of things that is difficult to predict. And with this ChronoPulse, you can tell, right, from this juncture in the short future, what can we look at? What are the things that's looking exciting?
Tim, we have a panel of heavyweight industry veterans here, myself not included. Why was it important to bring in outside expertise for a project like this?
When you design an index, it is obviously a lot about data, but there are also questions like how many brands do you want to factor in? How many models per brand do you want to factor in? Do you want to cap the weight of a certain brand? And given that it was for us important to have a global acceptance of our index, we wanted to bring in a global group of experts that would help us to design the index beyond just the data science into the index. And so we're super, super happy to find this veteran group of experts that helped us to give their thoughts and input into the creation of that index. So I think that's the reason why this will be the world's index.
And I want to kick it over to gentleman dealer, Mr. Eric Wen now. Obviously for the last, forever really, a few brands, Rolex, Patek, and RPA, have taken up the majority of the oxygen in the room. But this index, for example, has 14 different brands. And I just want to hear a little bit about why should people care about those other 11? And even in your own experience as a dealer, have you seen, or how have you seen clients kind of start in the middle and then branch out into other nooks and crannies of our little industry?
It's important. Each brand has its own following, its own core group of collectors. Some people kind of focus on one brand more than all others. And a lot of people want a collection that represents a diverse set of brands, which is, I would say, the majority of collectors today. Because the index offers a wide array of models and brands, it becomes much more useful, more interesting for followers of those brands. And I think it's very important and special that ChronoPulse represents those.
And Brennan, any brands from your collection you want to keep an eye on?
I do always like to keep an eye on Tudor and Rolex, just because in some ways they kind of represent the engine at the front of the train. And if you see major changes with those brands, the chances are it's going to be something that manifests among a whole bunch of other brands. To some extent, my interests also are shaped by developments, maybe in the auction world. If there's surprises with respect to certain brands, I like to kind of see if that continues in the market. And I also like to take a look at the releases around the holidays. Sometimes brands will make a splash with a certain watch that no one expects, and I do like to see how that maybe ripples out through the market. And so I will definitely be looking at Chrono24 for that kind of information.
And just to wrap up here, now that we talked about other sectors of the market, and obviously this tool is still growing and developing, can you give us a little hint of maybe what's ahead for ChronoPulse?
I mean, today is just the start. We published the first index and 14 indexes per brand, but we will now continue our work and go more in depth looking for certain vintage indexes, in the long term also indexes for certain models. We will also get a deeper integration of the index into our watch collection feature. You might know that you can upload your personal collection into the Chrono24 watch collection feature and then track the value of your collection on a daily basis. In the future, you will be able to compare your personal collection versus the development of an index. So I think that's a super exciting feature. And stay tuned, there'll be a lot more to come.
I want to thank everyone for being here, coming from far and wide to help us launch this new tool. For those who are interested, ChronoPulse is now live. Be sure to check it out. The tool will continue to grow and develop, and stay tuned to this channel for more videos just like this.